Welcome to part 2 of glazing with Flambé. So the glaze is totally dry. I can handle it without it getting on me. I do want to take the little bit off that is on the foot. And before I get on to glazing the next coat, I'm going to talk about some of the questions that you guys had for me. One of the questions, let's see, Julie Bear asked about the pinholing. And I don't know that it is possible to get close enough with this, but if you look very, very closely, you might be able to see that there is a little bit of what is called orange peel texture on the glaze. This is not quite what is referred to as pinholing. In glazes, this is pretty common with certain kinds of glazes. And unfortunately with the copper reds, that is going to be not always going to be the case, but it will be fairly common. It does not affect the food safety of the glaze. It is not pinholes, it's orange peel. The next question was Viv Moss asked about which glazes need to be thick. Most of the AMACO glazes are formulated to use 3 coats right out of the jar. They should not need any kind of thinning or thickening. They should be accurate to our tiles with 3 coats right out of the jar. That said, there are a couple of glazes that do better with a little bit more. Blue Rutile is one of the most typical of these. If it's too thin, it's going to be brown. And it doesn't really get the blue float until you get at least 3 coats. For some people, they may find it doesn't even get blue until they put 4, possibly even 5 coats on there. So that is a consideration. But we do try to make everything work for 1 coat, 2 coat, 3 coat, and 3 coats should be accurate. The best advice I can give you is to look on the Potter's Choice page at AMACO.com, and on that page, if you scroll down, there are 1 coat, 2 coat, 3 coat tiles for most of our glazes, and you can see what too thin a coat looks like so that if you are having trouble, you know what to look for. Frank Rasmussen was asking about texture. And so I thought I'd share these with you. These are some of our preliminary tiles. When we are looking at a new glaze, we decide which chip it's going to be on, and that affects which label is on the tile on the jar. So we put it on all of our different tiles. And some of the textures on these are stronger than others. So a texture like this, which is very deep, you do actually see some of the breaking across the surface. But some of the textures like this, I don't know if you can even see that has a texture. There you go. That is the tile for Art Deco green. And you can see it's a very subtle texture. And the copper red just completely obliterates the texture. So, although yes, you can use them on texture, you might not see much of your texture. And the more texture there is, the more areas that the glaze is going to break on. And as it breaks, you get less and less of the color and more of the break. So, that's what it looks like on texture. I think it looks best on an untextured surface. So Frank Hott was asking if the base formula for Flambé and copper red are the same, and yes, they are. And if that means that the base formula for blue spark and Junebug are the same, and honestly, I do not think that they're exactly the same. They are in the same family, but they are not the same base. Kelsey Schroeder asked about clay body, and the copper reds break clear on texture, and so you're going to see like this tile is kind of more of a brownish clay body. It's a very subtle difference, but you can see how it looks a little browner, but the glaze itself is the same. We have not yet tested the copper reds on dark clay bodies or black clay bodies, so I can't really tell you if they look substantially different on that. Because of the COVID quarantine and our factory being shut down, we're a little bit behind on some of our clay body testing. So we should have those results in a couple of months as things kind of start getting back to our usual routine. And we are planning on having clay body comparisons and having those posted on our Potter's Choice page. So as I said, now that it is dry to the touch, you can see there's still some spots where it's a little bit darker, but it is overall, it's dry enough where I can handle it. I'm going to apply my second coat, and I'm going to apply it just as thick as the first one. Now this time I'm going to start at the foot so that I can kind of get all the way down there, and I'd like to do kind of like a little wiggle, wiggle, wiggle with my brush, and then come back. Now you can see again, the glaze is really thick. I'm not trying to thin it. I'm not trying to apply it thinner. I'm just letting it just be as thick as it wants to be. Tracy Gamble, in her videos and in her workshops, she describes applying glaze, AMACO glazes, as floating the glaze on. If you start to get a drag of your brush on the wear, then it is not, you do not have enough glaze. You need to put more glaze on your brush. The bristles of your brush should never be dragging across the pot. So there we go. There's coat number 2. Like I said, I just want to keep it really even, but I don't want to try to make it thin. And I will be back. Oh, I did have one other comparison to show you. So these are our copper reds. This is copper red. And it is on 2 textured tiles. This is copper red at cone 5, and this is copper red at cone 6. And you'll notice a few things. One is that it is more red at 5 and starts to show some purples and blues at cone 6. But you'll also see that as it gets hotter, it starts to break more. So if you have a lot of texture, or if you're firing very hot, you're going to get increasing amounts of clear. So if you're pushing your firings up towards cone 7, you may be ending up with only a little bit of color down at the bottom because that glaze is running and it's not thick enough to get that reduction. So a hot cone 5 or cone 6 is recommended. Both of these tiles have the same texture stamp on them. This one is actually in reverse, but you can see how the texture, even though these were fired up right, the texture has just disappeared on this one. It does start to show up at cone 6. So I will see you guys back here at 1:30 for coat number 3. If you have any more questions, just drop them in the comments and I will see you in an hour. Thanks, guys.